everyone. I want to welcome you to another episode of the Marketing Center of Excellence podcast. My name is Lane Houck, and I am your host of the MCoE podcast. Before I introduce our special guest for this episode, I want to quickly share the purpose of the Marketing Center of Excellence podcast. So let's start with, what is a Center of Excellence? Well, the wiki on it says a Center of Excellence is a team, a shared facility, or an entity that provides leadership, best practices, research, support, and training for a focused area or subject matter. So in that vein, the core purpose of the Marketing Center of Excellence is to provide leadership and best practices for those in the marketing industry. Whether you are brand new to the marketing industry, a seasoned vet, or aspiring to start a marketing agency, the Marketing Center of Excellence promises to be a wealthy resource for you in that journey. So on that note, let's transition, and I want to introduce our special guests today, Glen Ingram and Joshua Fletcher. Gentlemen, start your engines. How are you today?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Doing good.
I'm doing well as well. And so if you don't know, I'm Joshua Fletcher, Fletch. The other guy's Glen.
Thanks, Fletch. All right, so before I let you guys take off and start talking about today's topic, let me provide or attempt to provide our listeners with a proper introduction of Glen and Joshua. So Glen Ingram. Glen is the owner at Web Search Pros, an ADA-compliant website design and search engine marketing company. He is internationally certified, or is an internationally certified accessibility specialist with over 20 years of sales and management experience and a few $1 million of personal sales. Glen is considered a subject matter expert on building websites that comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act and similar state laws. All right, now on to Fletch. Joshua Fletcher is the founder of Search Explosion. He is an internationally renowned trainer, coach, and speaker, helping people understand and leverage the changing landscape of what the internet truly means as a vehicle for communication, sales, community, and marketing. He is considered a subject matter expert in the field of SEO and has, or currently is, ranking 60 million plus URLs and over 1 million city keywords on page 1 of Google. He has also developed the Web Standards UMAC framework of understanding SEO and search engines. Together, Glen, Joshua, and their third partner, Mike, have launched WebA11y, which is a website accessibility coaching company that also provides white label fulfillment of ADA compliant websites for agencies and their customers. All right, well, that was a mouthful, guys. So let's jump into the theme for today's episode, which is how the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and SEO all come together under one umbrella in a company's website and online presence and search, and probably more importantly, how agency owners and how those in the marketing industry need to care about this. So let's start with that, guys. Why should an agency owner, why should anybody in the marketing industry actually care about the ADA, website compliance, and SEO, and how they all come together?
You want to talk, Glen? I can. I like talking about this.
Go ahead.
So the way I got into it, I used to be a general contractor. And so I was in the field. We had a KB2 license here in Arizona. We worked on small commercial as well as residential. Well, that small commercial, because it's a commercial building, we had overlap that we had to, it was a building code. The Americans with Disabilities Act is an actual building code,
right?
So that businesses and public facilities need to be accessible. You've seen probably wheelchair ramps and stall doors that are wider. If you've stayed in a hotel room, that was one of the rooms that were set aside for people in wheelchairs. You'll understand the nature. Like, the facilities are just a little bit different. And so within construction, I realized that it's not something you get to opt out of, right? It's not something that you can just say, oh, well, I'm not going to do that. And if I get less business, so be it. It's a building code. It's illegal. They will close you down. You won't get the certificate of occupancy if it's a new build. You literally cannot do business without it. So early last year, I started noticing some news articles online, Search Engine Journal, maybe Moz, Roundtable, some of those things, starting to talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act and websites. So, it kind of got my attention, but didn't really start kind of getting traction in my mind until the end of 2019, when I started getting marketed to. I started getting emails about kind of the growing trend of lawsuits in this field. And that was really when I started digging into it more. And the reason I did was because I had a whole lot of, I've got, well, 60 million URLs ranking and all that. I've got a lot of exposure, right?
Sure.
I've got a lot of stuff that a lot of people are looking at. And if there is now a standard to which all of that content needed to be built, I want to be aware of it because A, I don't want to get sued. B, it'd be cool if I could make my website accessible to even more people. And then kind of on and on, we dug in further and further. And what I realized was that kind of the combination of my background in construction, so I had familiarity with the ADA, and then the approach that I'd taken to do SEO, which really came out of web standards in a lot of ways, let me notice this and start to kind of piece it together and understanding the implications, the really important features of all of this rather quickly. And so that's when I kind of reached out in one of the groups that we were a part of and started asking people about what they were doing to kind of protect themselves or build their websites differently, or anything along those lines. And that's when I got kind of back in touch with Glen, who I'd known since 2013, but he kind of had a different ushering into the ADA and how it applies to websites. And Glen, I don't know if that's a good place for you to kind of jump in and start to talk about how you wound up in this field.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it was kind of mid 2018, so now almost 2 years ago. I had two attorneys and then a friend approached me, now seems over a real short period of time, asking me if I could build websites for blind people. And I, as most agencies, probably had similar reactions the first time someone asked me this. I said, I need to make a visual medium work for someone that doesn't see. And the attorney said, yes, I have clients that are getting sued over it. Can you help? And I did like a lot of agencies. I went back, took a look, saw there was some type of WordPress plugin, just thought, the people that did this didn't know what they were doing, and kind of went on. But when I typically when I hear something for the third time, I start to think, maybe I should listen to this. Mm-hmm. And so I started to do a little bit of research. And I was fortunate, very fortunate at the time, that my agency was running kind of on autopilot with the team I had in place. So I basically went down the rabbit's hole, I call it. And for 8 weeks, I probably put 40, 50, 60 hours a week into doing research, contacting anyone in the industry, anywhere in the world that had access or experience in this, just because the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn. And, kind of a little bit to your question as far as why should agency owners be aware of this or concerned, is from what Fletcher spoke about with physical businesses. That all started back in 1990 with George H.W. Bush when he signed in the Americans with Disabilities Act. Well, in 2010, at a ceremony to commemorate that, President Obama made the suggestion that the Department of Justice needs to extend that to digital properties. So digital properties were websites, videos, video games, apps, and the whole gambit of digital. So with starting that,
Glenn?
I'm sorry?
When was that? What year?
2010.
Okay.
So it was on the 20th anniversary of the original ADA. Mm-hmm. And so with doing research with this, I started to realize that what had happened with that, and I know it's a surprise, but our government started something and then fell off and didn't quite follow through to the degree which maybe they should have. Starting in 2012 was the first federal or international lawsuit. It was in Australia over a company being sued because their website didn't work properly. And starting in 2015, we started seeing federal lawsuits in the US. This started off kind of slowly. There were like 57 the first year, like about 300 the second year, and these were all in federal courts. And then in 2018 is when California launched a new law for it. You've also seen state laws come up about in now almost every state. Some of them are more punitive than others, of course. Mm-hmm. But with the introduction of the UNRUH, that's UNRUH Act, or extension of the UNRUH Act to include websites as discrimination, it's shocking that California is a little bit litigious. People may not realize that. But with that, all of a sudden, the first year in 2018, there were 4,000 federal or state lawsuits in the state of California just referring to the UNRUH Act. Last year, between federal and state lawsuits, we haven't gotten all the numbers yet, just because it's kind of a pain in the butt to look through all the different state courts in California. And some of you have to search day by day. You can't even search by a week or a month. But there's a law firm out of Chicago that's done a great job at tracking all this. And their estimate was last year there were between 12 and 15,000 businesses sued. And their forecast for 2020 was over 100,000 businesses will be sued. So
a 10x increase in just 1 year?
We've been seeing 3 to 5 increases every year from a federal level, and then once you start getting state laws, so now they can do it through state courts versus federal courts and everything like that. Along with one of the big, I think, fuel on the fire last year was whatever happened transpired with the Domino's lawsuit. Just to give you a little background, in December of 2017, the Ninth Circuit judge in the state that covers California, kind of that whole Southwest region, made a ruling that Domino's lawsuit website did not have to comply with the ADA, since it was a website, it wasn't their physical business.
Okay.
Well, the attorney representing the blind person that was suing Domino's appealed that. So in January of 2019, the Court of Appeals the Federal Court of Appeals that's over that circuit said, no, a website is an extension of your physical business or acts in lieu of a physical business if you don't have one. So even if you don't have a brick and mortar, your website still has to fall under what's called a place of public accommodation. So it must comply with the Americans with Disability Act.
No matter what size your business is, no matter whether you have a physical place of business or not, you're saying that now, because of this Domino's decision, businesses of all sizes, shapes, whether they have a physical office or not, location or not, if they have a website, the website needs to be compliant?
Unless you're a church, and not to play on the word Domino's, but that was the first domino to fall when that happened at the appellate court. What was the final domino was on October 7th of last year, Domino's tried to appeal that to the U.S. Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court issued a statement saying that they would not hear the case, and in their opinion paper basically upheld the appellate court's opinion that a website is an extension of a physical business, so hence it must comply. And there have been a lot of other court cases where the judges have made that same statement that said they're not going to wait for the Department of Justice to write this out, pen and paper on a piece of paper. They've taken it upon themselves to basically use precedents to create case law. So that's kind of where I came to this.
The Supreme Court made a statement in their denial to hear the case. That little statement that they made obviously carried great weight, it sounds like.
Exactly, and so that's why I think Sayworth is the law firm out of Chicago, probably has made this prediction for over 100,000 lawsuits, because primarily up until the end of last year, most of your federal lawsuits were in Florida and New York, and then filtered across the country. Now that this kind of opinion has come down from the U.S. Supreme Court, now you're going to see other circuits in the U.S. circuit courts probably adapting or changing their opinions based on what the Supreme Court issued in October.
It's going to open up every district, basically, is what it sounds like for this cause of action.
That would be my assumption, and a lot of the attorneys that I work with and consult with, and we do this for, they have the same opinion as well.
So that's maybe a great way to segue into why should agency owners care? I mean, I think we're talking about the legal liability here, but maybe you guys have, to answer that question. Like, I'm an agency owner, I've been building websites for 10 years, kind of like what Fletch was saying, I've got all these sites out there, sites that are ranking. Why should I care about this? Why should I take time to divert my time and attention to learning about this, and even potentially, working into our agency as a real process, if you will, or workflow in terms of web development? Why does this matter?
Well, I think 3 primary components of that is, first of all, some of these what are referred to as serial litigants. I mean, let's be honest, there aren't 100,000 different blind people going to make 100,000 lawsuits. You're going to have the same people filing lawsuit after lawsuit after lawsuit. What they realized in the last couple of years is, instead of just suing Fletch for his business website, if you're the one that built it, now they can sue him and you and collect damages from each of you. When you look at the Americans with Disabilities Act with regard to a commercial building, like Fletch was talking about, you can be sued what's called per occurrence. So if the door is too hard to open, if the bathroom stall is not proper, every violation carries with it another occurrence.
Ooh.
Well, with a website, there's only one occurrence by precedence of courts. So if I can only get $10,000 per occurrence, well, I can get $10,000 from Fletch and $10,000 from you. So now I just made $20,000 instead of 10.
Would each page that's in violation or not compliant, or is it just the whole site as a whole, or is each page that's in violation a separate occurrence?
Nope, it's just one, but it's kind of like the old baking adage, in for a penny, in for a pound. You only need one violation to be sued for. So it doesn't matter how close your website is, but now you can sue the business owner and the developer. So now you have two people to collect from. So that was the first reason that really caught my attention, is I don't want to be sued by people because at the bottom of my website it says developed by, built by, hosted by, or whatever. WebA11y down in Florida was the first lawsuit that this came into effect with, and the developer was sued. There were some that started being sued last year in January in California. So that was my first concern, was just liability. And then when you realize that what's happened for some other businesses that were sued to recoup their funds, they've turned around and sued the developer. So in the end, we're still all at risk. And what I learned that was pretty disappointing was going down and understanding more about insurance. Most of the insurance that we have doesn't cover it. It took me 4 months of harassing the heck out of insurance companies to finally come up with a good policy from a company that understood this. They gave me a general liability with a commercial liability. They call it a BizPop, plus the cyber rider in order to cover it. And what's frustrating as heck to me is the insurance that I'd had for years since I started my agency that didn't cover me was costing me, I think, $1,200 or $1,300 a year. And the proper insurance is costing me $1,182 a year.
So real quick, what's that type of insurance policy that agency owners should be looking into?
It's called general liability with also professional liability. And there was some type of special cyber rider that covered this. And I have a resource for it, again, with bugging people all over the country. I finally had one of my oldest friends back in Nebraska's son had just went from working for one big commercial insurance company to another. And he had about thrown up his hands one Friday and just said, go with these other people. I think he was just tired of me harassing him, but I've known him since he was born. So he's like a stepson. So he couldn't say no. If he said no, I'd call his dad and say, tell your kid to get his crap together. So it was kind of funny. On one Friday, he told me, go with somebody else. Their prices are better than what I can find for you. The next Tuesday morning, I get a frantic phone call, early for me because I'm 2 hours behind him, saying, I was just in with this company yesterday and they went over things. He goes, we spent an hour and a half just going over your stuff. And he goes, they have a solution and we can do everything. And it's everything you wanted. And so I've been able to, like I said, move my insurance to it. And I've been recommending a lot of other people to it because this guy works for a nationwide company. So he can take care of you no matter where you're at in the country. Your price may vary a little bit from state to state. But I mean, here's the extent of this insurance liability. It's just crazy when you start talking about litigations and attorneys. If my wife was taking a check for my company to the bank in her personal car, and she makes the comment that she was doing that, not only does our personal insurance have to take care of the accident if she hits somebody, now they can sue my company because she was in the act of doing something for the business, even if it's just taking a check. This provides coverage for that stuff too. So just a lot of little things that I didn't know I needed coverage for.
Yeah, those are good points. Fletch, you got anything you want to offer on this topic as well as why agency owners should care and pay attention?
Money. I like money. I like offering something that people need, even if they're not aware of it, that I can get paid for to get my foot in the door and help them with other digital marketing things that they need to have. If I'm the first person talking to a business owner about a way they can protect themselves from a lawsuit, improve their search engine optimization results, have a mobile responsive website, and potentially qualify for a tax credit, I'm a resource now. I don't mind telling people about how many benefits there are to doing things this way over and compared to what they were previously doing. And being the bearer of good news, so to speak, even though part of it's kind of loaded with this, you don't want the negative thing. You're going to be one of the first people talking to a business most of the time about maybe not one of these things in general. Like everybody and their dog has had an SEO agency call them saying, hey, let's get you more results on SEO. Very few people come at that from a perspective of, hey, let's do your SEO the right way and get you a $5,000 federal tax credit, as well as protect you from a lawsuit. Wait, now this is different, right? So it's a way to make yourself more distinct in the marketplace. And, not that SEO is crowded or saturated by any means, but just standing out a little bit more, I think, is always helpful.
So you brought up a couple of really good points there. I mean, we talked about why care. Well, money, but so let's just dive into a couple of those things you just brought up, Fletch. Talked about the IRS tax credit, which I have up here in front of my screen. You talked about SEO and how it intersects with this whole issue of ADA accessibility and website compliance. And you talked about, which I think is a really good point, just the unique value proposition, right? You're different. You're talking about something that every other website company that they've ever talked to before has probably never mentioned before. So that UVP is sort of the differentiator. Dive into those three points a little bit more.
Would you click on that button where it says download IRS before he starts talking?
Sure.
The 8826. Yeah.
Another reason why you need a professional to help manage your website. Sorry, I couldn't pass that up.
You couldn't really.
You knew that was there, Glenn. You knew that was there.
ADA.gov and their links don't work. Is that an accessibility guideline infraction?
You think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Broken
And it's been like that for a year. So sorry. I digress. Go ahead, Fletch.
No, it's all good. I mean, you look at this from an agency standpoint, and there's a couple different ways to get business, right? You can rank and wait for inbound calls to come in and form fills. That's great. I love it. I do that a lot. But I also look to create a demand, so to speak, by doing either outreach or cold calls or speaking in groups. Like that's one of the things that I've done that has probably brought me the most business is being a kind of a subject matter expert and bringing something to someone's attention they didn't really look at before. And so, 5-6 years ago, SEO, talking about SEOs that actually got results and helped, businesses, that was new and fresh. And I did a lot of good with that. But then, everybody now has heard of SEO, so to speak, right? You go to a chamber meeting or a Better Business Bureau presentation or something like that. And, you're just the next person coming in trying to sell SEO as your services. This is something very different, right? This is because of the tax credit, because of the liability, and because nobody's really put all those things together with search engine optimization. What WCAG is a web standard that lets a screen reader effectively navigate content on a web page, and I say understand it, but be able to translate the meaning that's on that page to something that's audible, right? That can be read through the electronic voices that are on a screen reader. Well, that's very similar to what Google Bot does and how the algorithm works. And so putting together search engine optimization and WCAG, we get something that I refer to as web standards SEO. This is doing search engine optimization in a way that adheres to the standards that are put in place for screen readers, Googlebot, whoever else, to be able to understand more properly. That's the relevance piece of search engine optimization that a lot of people are like, well, how do I get, better rankings? Well, if you have more relevant content and more influence, you put those two together, you rank better. So this is just a way of doing that in a very specific manner above that standard again, that can, I won't say prevent. If you get sued, you're likely going to be able to settle for less money. And you're a smaller target if you don't have a lot of these flagrant infractions. Now, doing that also then qualifies you for, up to $5,000 a year in a tax at the federal level. There are state, policies and things in place depending on where you are as well. You kind of wind up putting yourself in a position where you have a very unique, very valuable offer to get somebody's website up to standards. And then if you want to go on with what we typically have done, which is just ongoing search engine influence building, link building, or whatever you want to call it, the stage is set to do that very efficiently because your site's already built correctly. It's going to take less links to rank and to get that traffic. And so that's really the kind of the unique situation that I see this. And so then it's like, well, if you want to pick up the phone and cold call, if you want to run through, we're going to pull up a tool here in a little bit and run through a website. We put together quick little Loom videos and can fire those out to businesses really quickly to help them see kind of what's going on with their website. If you want to just start ranking for these terms, right? There's not a lot of search volume yet, but if those cases hit 100,000 this year, you can bet. Yeah, and there's zero competition for it right now. So you're going to be able to kind of get in front of I don't like chasing trends because it's like, all right, I'm extrapolating the curve here and it's going to go like this. This is a trend because of a foundational event that happened, which are these legislation and lawsuits. They have set the stage to continue to push things this direction. Whether they go to 50,000 or 100,000 or 20,000 doesn't really matter.
Right.
They are being driven by something that's very different in the environment. And that's not going to change. It's been in place for 30 years. The The people on the right are not going to get rid of the tax credit because they like business. The people on the left are not going to get rid of the ADA applying to websites. So it's something that looks like it's very much going to be in place in the United States for a while.
I agree, yeah. So let's talk about that tax credit a little bit. Help us understand, Glenn or Fletch, or both you guys, just a little bit about how that works. It sounds really interesting. Obviously, anytime you can go to a business as an agency and not only inform and educate them about potential legal liability, ways that they're underserving a portion of their market or their target market, but then also say, well, we can help you pay for that. Help you pay to fix it. Help you get paid to fix it, if you will, or we get refunded. Talk to us about how that tax credit works, or how you've seen it work.
Well, the federal tax credit that Fletcher is referring to for S and C Corps is 8826 is the form. I think for your proprietary, sole proprietorships and stuff like that, there's a reference there. I think it's maybe Form 3000. So if you just Google Form 8826, but if you look up at there at the top there, Lane, in that second line, those are your two primary qualifications. As a business, you need less than $1 million in revenue, or, and I emphasize, or less than 30 full-time employees for 26 weeks of that year. So that's where we see a lot of businesses qualify as the number of employees, because it's pretty easy to get a revenue.
Sure.
Yeah, but that's where we see a lot of people doing it. So if you qualify for that, what this form was kind of initially created for was for small businesses to help them make their businesses compliant, like Fletcher was talking about, your doors, your stalls, your bathrooms, and things like that. Well, it's all around accessibility. So that CPAs and legal attorneys, tax attorneys that I've talked to, and I think maybe Fletcher will agree, the ones he's spoken with, said, yes, this applies to your website, since the lawsuits have said your website's the extension of your physical business. So if you qualify from a business size, once you spend $250 each year, after that, it's 50 cents on the dollar of a tax credit up to a $10,000 spend. So each year, if you spend $10,250, you qualify for a $5,000 tax credit. Now, that's not a tax deduction, that's a credit. So at the end of the year, if you owe the federal government $8,000 in taxes and you have a $5,000 tax credit, now you write a check for $3,000.
Big.
So according to my CPA, that's equivalent to like a $20,000 tax deduction.
Wow. And that can just go to pay for helping them get compliant with their website as a company. Period of story. Your website's not in compliance today. Let's help you get that in compliance, and let's help you fund at least a portion of the cost of doing that. So you're going to get a tax credit for the expenditure once you file your tax. You got to put up the money first. Mm-hmm. At the end of the year, once you file your taxes, you get the credit back. And then by doing that, also, you're going to help to at least potentially, like Fletch said, alleviate some of that legal liability, because you're not going to be that low-hanging fruit for the law firm mills that are going through and filing a bunch of these ADA compliant website lawsuits, right?
Exactly. As a small business, it is low-hanging fruit. I mean, by doing this and working with someone that truly understands how to make a website accessible, I mean, we can jump on a website and it takes me 5 to 10 seconds to tell you if it's accessible and to file a lawsuit. By doing this, we're going to get rid of a lot of those for your mom and pops, because the mom and pops, well, a company called WebA11y, they have a wave tool that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. They did a survey February of 2019. They tested 1 million URLs. It was called the WebA11y. Out of 1 million homepage URLs, 2.2% were compliant. They tested that again in August of last year, and it made up to 2.8%. So 97% of websites on the internet are not accessible.
Wow.
Does that look like maybe a little bit of opportunity for an agency?
I see opportunity in in 3 areas. One, obviously, we see the opportunity for the law firms, the plaintiff work for the people with disabilities, because the majority of them of websites out there are just simply not accessible, as you just stated. So there's a huge opportunity for the law firms from a legal standpoint. Obviously, a huge opportunity for the businesses just to serve more of the population. I know, Fletch, I've heard you're passionate about this in just terms of serving people that are in this market who are disabled, who have hearing or visual impairments or what have you. The third opportunity I see is obviously, like you were just saying, Glenn, for the agencies to serve all these businesses around the country that have to be in compliance and just strictly aren't.
Yeah, Glenn, you've got a great perspective on what Lane brought up, which is that like there's a lot of people who don't have the same options that what we think of like a normal sighted or able to hear person would on the internet, right? And so just looking at a SERP, okay, well, if I'm unable to see and I type in emergency plumber Phoenix and I go to the first result and I pull the website up and it isn't giving me the information I need, I'm bouncing, I'm going to the next result. I'm bouncing, I'm going to the result that it takes for me to get to a place where my screen reader can actually give me the information I need to say, oh, this guy's going to be able to come out and fix this a broken pipe from, whatever. Somebody dropped a tree in your front yard and it broke your service connection or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So it does a lot of different things, but opening up to a population that is going to be bouncing off of 97% of websites potentially and finding yours, you now don't even have to rank quite as well to get the same type of traffic impact from that. On top of just, it's great to build. Like I see websites and search engine optimization as really like accessibility for me means making my offer accessible to my potential market, period. Right? So some of my potential market may need a screen reader. Some of my potential market may not go to Google to find something to find my site. Like I had a website for years, never got any traffic. Why? Well, because the market was on Google and I wasn't ranking on Google. So I needed to make my, I see this as just a natural extension of what we do with SEO. And, potentially an extra 20% of customers finding your website and being able to interact with it and go through the buying experience and actually buy something. It's huge. That's a huge, you talk about low-hanging fruit, right? Get this in place and you may, serve up to 20% more people that your competition is simply almost ignoring is not the right word. They're unaware of the fact that their website's not really communicating well to people who need these technologies in place.
Yeah, and part of the reason why we're doing this podcast episode is because there's so many people, even in our industry, in the marketing industry, that are just really completely unaware of this issue at all. Like it's not even on their radar. They don't even know it exists. Why don't you guys talk about the market? I mean, what is the market of disabled persons that need some level of accessibility in order to be able to use the internet?
Well, we talk about blind a lot just because that's been the impetus, blind or deaf, for a lot of these lawsuits. Right. But let's just take a look at some of the simple numbers. 9% of guys, so between 8 and 10, 9% of guys are colorblind by the time they're 50. So if you don't have enough color contrast between your text and the background, they can't read your website. And keep in mind, as we start talking about these older things, everybody always wants to talk about mobile usage and cell phones. Well, those are kids that don't have dollars to spend. The guys over 50 have a little bit more money in their wallets, so they have expendable income. An example I like to use is on my cousin over in California. His wife has MS and is advanced to the stages to where she can't use a mouse. So every website needs to be programmed and built properly so you can navigate the entire website with only the tab and the enter keys on your keyboard. Basically, your tab key turns into your pointer and your enter key turns into your clicker. Well, if there's something going on with their home and their classic cars and stuff like this, and she needs to navigate a website, if it's not built properly, she can't navigate. Mm-hmm. So when you just start looking at people that are blind, people that are colorblind, people that can't see well, so they have to actually have their face right up next to a computer screen, people that are deaf, people that are blind and deaf, people that need hearing assistance, people that have epilepsy. This blew my mind when I started looking about this, because I was always a fan of sliders and doing things to have motion on a website so it wasn't looking back at me. When I first read about this, I kind of had to come to Jesus being myself, hoping I had never done this. But if a slider is moving too fast and the image isn't on the screen long enough, you could actually cause somebody that has epilepsy to have a seizure. And then, like I said, MSMD, stuff like this, when you talk about motor skills or they can't navigate the website, maybe they have an amputee or whatever. And the biggest, grayest area that we're still kind of exploring and understanding are people with cognitive issues. We constantly hear screen readers for blind, but there are some people that have maybe dyslexia or different types of learning disorders that actually use a screen reader because it's easier for them to hear what's on the website than to read it and comprehend it themselves.
That's a great point too.
So yeah, it's just when you start looking at all these different things, you have almost between 19 and 20% of the population, according to the CDC and different studies have been made, that have at least one of these permanent disabilities. When you start bringing in temporary or environmental disabilities, maybe you're a young mother trying to find something on your phone with one hand with a baby and your other hand on your hip. So now you're temporarily disabled basically, or have an issue to where you have to be able to navigate that website differently than you would at a normal condition. They call those temporary disabilities. So when you start bringing into all the different things that we're doing as a society and environmentally, when websites are built properly to navigate easily, and stupid little things like we all see all the time where you have a phone number on a website and you can't click it to call. Well, that mom with a baby in one arm and a phone in the other can't call the plumber when her basement's flooding or her water's leaking. So a lot of little things just kind of lead into, as Fletcher was saying, the website being more accessible to everybody.
So I hear you saying really about 20% of the market, of the buying market for any business, depending on what they're in, is potentially, not able to crawl, or not able to, access a site because of one or more issues with that website being non-accessible for WCAG. So that you're missing out on the market, you're missing out on the money opportunity that Fletch was talking about. I also have seen, it seems like you guys maybe can comment on this, but when you see these lawsuits, they're really, discrimination lawsuits at their core, aren't they?
Yeah, that's what Americans with Disabilities Act and states lawsuits were at, was just a form to not discriminate against an individual based on disability. It's just extensions of other types of disability laws in the past.
So the plaintiff law firms are really making the case that, business A doesn't have an accessible website and they're discriminating against, say, 20% of the population who just can't use their website because they've chosen or whatever not to bring their site into compliance. And that's, I've seen it as part of the narrative of the lawsuit is, hey, this, Domino's didn't care about, my client as a blind person. They obviously, didn't care to make their site compliant. And it's almost like there's that social aspect of, you need to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Sensitive, to people who have these issues and bring your site into compliance for that reason alone. Let's talk about the intersection between website accessibility and SEO. Why do those two come together? Let's maybe do a little deep dive for 5 or 10 minutes into how SEO and website accessibility, how they intersect and why it matters.
Can I lead off real quick and then you wrap it up, buddy?
Yeah, go.
It became kind of evident to me as I went through learning how to do this, because once I started seeing the opportunity, and understanding that optimization, SEO, I love, it's still going to be a mainstay of our agency, but I'm competing against Fletch, I'm competing against you. We're all just trying to tell everyone else that we're doing a better job than everyone else out there. Right. And there were so few people in this arena. And I was able to, for the first time in my career, be on the front side of something on the internet instead of just differentiating myself. So as I went down this rabbit's hole to do this, it was kind of apparent to me that as someone who built websites for on-page, what we call SEO, according to web standards, it was just an extension and just taking it to another level and kind of understanding it at a different level. So for me, it was an easier transition for my agency. And I say that because last year I traveled up and down California and different parts of the country speaking to legal groups, restaurant groups, hospitality groups, and a lot of web development groups. And the web developers that didn't come from this background with kind of like the UMAC framework that Fletch talks about had a lot harder time comprehending, understanding, and making that mind shift than those of us that built sites based on what was the best way for Google to crawl it to make it easier for me to rank customer sites. So for me, if you're doing those two together, it was a natural extension. People that didn't have that background and knowledge, it's a lot harder transition to doing this. Go ahead, Fletch. I just want to point that out.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did. That actually kind of, you lobbed it up here real nice for me to be able to take a swing at it.
If we were younger, we could be a pro volleyball team.
Yeah, well, maybe not. I don't know. We could try. Now you got me all derailed. So, no, it's all good. So like looking at like UMAC, it stands for URL, meta, anchor, right? Links, and then content. And so those are things that not only does someone who's normally sighted interact with the website, they see the content, right? But there's stuff behind the scenes. The URL is something people are usually kind of familiar with as far as how you navigate the web. But then this meta information, some of the anchor text information is stuff that really only technology looks at. And so URLs are a very important ranking factor and always will be. Why? Because they're unique and they're supposed to be descriptive of the content on the page. So is the page title, right? The page title, according to WCAG, needs to be meaningful and unique on every single page of the website, right? And so I used to go through and do like an audit or an overview on someone's website, and I used a tool called Screaming Frog. It would essentially crawl the website. I could look and see how many duplicate page titles that website had, and I could say, hey, this is not ideal from an SEO standpoint because your title is influential to the search engine to help you rank. And so if all of these are the same, Google's going to be like, well, which page is supposed to rank for SEO Phoenix, for instance, right? Each of them being unique, you now have a much more cohesive context and piece of content on this document that's on a single web page. So with WCAG, that takes it a step further. Now, if I use Screaming Frog on somebody's website and they've got duplicate page titles, not only is that not ideal for SEO, it's actually technically illegal. And so that combined with like alt text which is alternative text for a non-text element. That can be an image or a graphic, or even there's just different stuff, different types of content on the web that you need to have alt for. So for years, there's kind of back and forth, is the juice worth the squeeze, so to speak, from an SEO standpoint? Do you put alt text in? Is it going to help you rank? Some people do, some people don't. Well, if you don't, that's actually technically in violation of these WCAG standards. And so when I began kind of doing this, and again, had nothing to do with the accessibility piece, I just looked at this from a standpoint of a bot saying, hey, I need to go understand the nature of the information on a page, and I can't understand it. And so what am I doing? I'm looking for clues. I say, oh, what's H1? I go and I look through the code and I find my heading, and it's got these words in it, and those words, match the search phrase, and so that turns into a 1 in the algorithm, and it goes on out through math, right? And so what I wanted to do, I say 1 means it matches. I wanted to get as many factors on one page to match with the search phrase as Google was going to pay attention to. And so I went a lot further than kind of the prime effects variables, which are kind of the top 2 or 3 that make 80% of the algorithm up, or whatever it might be. I'm not trying to contradict that at all. I think data shows that. But what's that other 20%? Well, that other 20% is the WCAG 2.1. And doing that, you're going to, okay, so if everybody's at 80%, who's going to win? Well, the people maybe at 87%, then have to have less links, which links tend to be the most expensive part of doing search engine optimization on an ongoing basis. And so from a standards perspective, getting these WCAG standards in place on your website mean you've got a head start already at everybody else in your market that's trying to rank for this. Not only are you catering to potentially 20% of the market that's not able to even use competitors' websites, but as far as the linking goes and the influence building that you're doing around that, you don't need to spend as much money or as much time going out and doing that. And so, initially it's like, with building, I go back to construction a lot. This is the foundation and the way you need to build it. And if you build the right foundation, you can build as tall a tower as you want. But if your foundation's kind of sketchy, you're going to constantly have problems with the building. It's just not going to work. The walls are going to shift and crack, and it's just going to take a lot more maintenance to keep that building, so to speak, that website functioning properly. So, from my perspective, I liked being able to extend further into web standards and the W3C, and noticing what WCAG is. It's just a very codified approach to exactly what needs to be in place for technology to be able to categorize the content on a single page. And that's really what we're doing with SEO.
So when you're looking at a specific page on a website that you're trying to conform to WCAG 2.1, what are you using to change the alt text, to change the H1, H2, H3 on the on page? any of the underlying meta that might be part of that? What are you guys doing or using to make those changes to bring a page into conformance?
Glenn, you could probably talk on this. Yeah, 5 fingers. 10?
Our fingers, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's the reality with what you have to do from that point of it is you have to do manual testing. You have to do some, because there are about 6 different automated tools out there that are each good within their own rights, but there's not an automated tool that's going to test everything. Mm-hmm. So we use automated tools like the Wave tool I talked about. There's another one's called Accessibility Insights for the Web. In Chrome and Firefox, they have what's called Google Lighthouse or Google Developer Tools built right into them. Mm-hmm. With those, you can add extensions to those that are called Axe and Axe Coconut. I don't know if they've released yet. There's an Axe Pro coming out. It may be a charge for it. From doing this for a while, I was able to get in on the beta part of that, and it's going to be a good tool once it's done and released to everybody. But so if we're looking at a website page, we're going to use 5 tools to try and identify every error in there, and then also go through and manually do it. So there's, again, some people always are looking for shortcuts in our industry. And I always wanted to kind of grab them by the throat and shake them a little bit to say, if you do things properly, you don't need shortcuts. And this is the epitome of this. You have to go through each page, page by page, because remember, Google does not rank websites. Google ranks web pages.
Pages, yep. Mm-hmm.
And so if that web page is built properly and you do all this to it so that it works for a screen reader, so a blind person now can paint a word picture of what this image is or non-text property is. And it just works for everyone better. Kind of back to Fletcher's talking about web standards. Sure, I think it was only 2 years ago this coming weekend, I'm at an SEO conference in Orlando, and by noon the first day, the guy running the conference, every time someone said, how come my website doesn't rank? Why doesn't my video rank? Why doesn't my Google map rank? He just kept pointing at me, and I said, should we even ask, or should we just assume their on page is messed up? And by the time we did this, he actually asked me to present the last day there just to go over web standards and how to build a web page properly, and to show people that if you do that, kind of like what Fletch mentioned, it doesn't take a whole lot of external influence to rank. And I was able to show them an insurance website in Southern California that was ranking up and down California with one link going to each page. But it was built properly so that, what I've been telling people for years, if you treat Google like a 3rd grader and make it easy for them to understand that's what this page is about, they're like, oh, okay, here you go, consumer, here's this website. So by doing these two and combining them, it just has made everything so much easier.
Well, so Glenn, that's the thing, like clarity. Let's just be clear. Mm-hmm. If you present information on a web page in a clear manner, Googlebot can understand it. A screen reader that a person on the other side of can understand. Well, that's literally the #1 factor for conversion as well. So in doing this properly, you've eliminated confusion. You've eliminated conflicting messages. And it's very clearly able to get a lot of checks to say, oh, this is, in fact, content about web standards, SEO, web development company. If that's all the case and that's what the page is about, a human on the other side of that is also going to not get distracted by weird stuff and things that are broken or all that kind of nonsense. And be able to go through the offer and get to a place where they can make a decision as well. And so there's a lot of crossover between doing this well and doing the web standards SEO and what that equates to from a conversion standpoint as well.
Well, and when you look at it, not just from the stuff behind the scenes, let's talk about the stuff that's forward-facing the customer. Because in some of these presentations last year, I've been able to talk to designers, web designers, and I love it because their heads literally explode. Let's look at color contrast because they want to be so cute about color sometimes. Well, again, with 9% of men being colorblind, about 3% of women, then you cannot read something, you cannot convert. When you look at your fonts, there are about 15 fonts out of the box that expand and contract. Because keep in mind, we have an aging society with our baby boomers, and those people still have money to spend. So if they can't make the website larger and the font larger so that it stays proportionate vertically and horizontally, then they're not going to buy this. And every time I've gotten designers there and they want to say this, that, or the other thing, I've made the comment and it just makes them, it's kind of funny. It shuts them up and they can't argue back because I say, you know, I've never had a customer, so a business owner, tell me that a consumer, one of his potential customers called and said, your website was too easy to read or too easy to navigate.
Right.
So back to what Fletcher was saying, the simpler you make it for the end consumer to make a buying decision and to convert into a client, the better your conversion rate is. Keep it simple. And I've done that because I complete the KISS method because I'm kind of stupid. So if I can keep it simple while being stupid, it's going to work better.
Well, this might be a good time to interject the question about the overlays, because I know for those agency owners who have heard about ADA and website compliance and are, maybe it's on their radar now. It's been for maybe 3 to 6 months because they've heard about some of these lawsuits, or they've sat in on one of your webinars before, guys, or whatever. It's just kind of on their radar. I've now seen, a number like UserWay and Accessibility, these new overlays like a plugin that you just, or a code you just drop in your site, and they claim to make your site, website compliant, with UserWay and Accessibility being the 2 most popular ones, and ADA comply being kind of a third one now that's making its appearance out there. Why don't you guys give our audience that's listening a little insight into the overlays that I just talked about, and what that does or doesn't do to a website?
Well, let's just look about what it would take to fulfill an overlay, and that's the proper verbiage for it, which is basically about 3 lines of code that are going to lie over the footer or the header. So are you thinking with 3 lines of code? If you look at ESPN right here, you see how it has trade cuts as an H1. You see how it has 5th year production as an H1. You see up there in your top right in blue, we have another H1. Well, by WCAG standards, you can only have 1 H1 on a page. After that, you have to go to an H2. And you can either go per div or per section, you can have more H2s, but then once you go to H3, you can't go back to an H2, because a screen reader is built to where they can read via tags, and so they can basically peruse through an article like you or I would peruse through a newspaper. So how are 3 lines of a code going to understand what should be the most primary label or tag, and then the second, then the third, and the fourth? And then again, with that 3 lines of code, how's it going to go through every one of these pictures and paint a word picture to say Michael Jordan dribbling down the court to do this stuff, Michael Jordan whispering in the ear to Tony Kukoc during a basketball game? How is 3 lines of code going to be intelligent enough to paint a word picture and give you an accurate and perceivable description for that alternate tag that Fletcher was talking about in the website? And then if you just look at those 2, how about just color contrast? As you're going to see those 75 color contrast errors. How is that 3 lines of code going to look at your content, look at your background, and especially when you apply it like a screen? So if it's a screen over the image with text on the front and the back, to identify, am I contrasting with the screen? Am I contrasting with the color behind the screen that I can't see? Well, if you can do all of that, how many millions of dollars would it cost to create? And if it would cost that many millions or billions of dollars to create, can you sell it for $50 or $70 or $500 a year and make money off of it?
And UserWay is free, and so is Accessibility, isn't it? I mean, they're free overlays for the most part.
UserWay is free. Accessibility is not. I think they're like $400 or $500 per year. Now, and if you read the fine print of UserWay, they tell you that this is not does not make your website compliant.
Okay.
Personally, I love UserWay, and I use UserWay on every site once we make them accessible and compliant, because I look at it as accessibility plus. Because let's take a look at screen readers real quick. You have JAWS that's built for Chrome. You have NV Access that's built for Firefox. My MacBook has something built into it. So if you're on a PC and you're using JAWS, there's times when I'm running like a madman and I'm all of a sudden going from Chrome to Firefox, and I have to look down to see what browser I'm using. And I can see, what's the odds that somebody that can't see could go from a Chrome to a Firefox, and now their JAWS screen reader doesn't interact properly because they're not on the browser that it was built for? Well, what I like, or let's say that they haven't not updated their Chrome, which we all know as we work with business owners, when they say, oh, how come you haven't made the updates to my website, Mr. Developer? Well, we have. Oh, I'm still seeing the old things. And you go into their office, and let's just pick on attorneys because they're easy to pick on. I can't tell you how many times I walked into a conference room of an attorney and they're on 4 old versions of updates of Chrome or Firefox, or for whatever godly reason they're still using Internet Explorer. And you update everything. They're like, oh, wow, that looks cool. When did you do that? 3 weeks ago. You just couldn't see it because you have cookies that haven't updated, you haven't cached, and things like that. So again, with kind of the understanding that you have the propensity to maybe get on a wrong browser or be in the wrong things. With UserWay, what it does is it gives you a secondary alternative once the site's accessible, because it has the screen reader on there. It has a great thing to be able to use for color contrast. It gives you the ability to expand and contrast. So it gives you an alternative, but it just doesn't protect you or make your prevent you from being sued, because it doesn't correct the root core of the website.
So have businesses been sued that are using UserWay?
Yeah, if you don't have your website done, yes. Of all these different things you just mentioned, we're building websites every month that have had a different overlay or plugin on there with the misperception that it made them compliant, that we're building websites for that were sued with those things on there. So yeah.
So just to clarify, because I think this is important, because I have heard plenty of people out there just saying that if you install UserWay on your website, it's going to make it accessible and you're good to go. And you know, there's kind of that misconception out there. But just so to reiterate, you guys are building websites, accessible websites now for businesses who have been referred to you because they've been sued after they installed UserWay on their website and it did not make it 100% compliant.
We're seeing UserWay as some, because there were certain industries where I'm getting a lot of referrals because I've spoken to a lot of attorneys in California. There are certain industries that were misusing that more than others. We're seeing it from the other two that you mentioned on a regular basis as well.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like for this too, I just go back to kind of the root understanding I have of accessibility, right? And so, if you're not making your website accessible to more people, you might protect yourself in some ways from a lawsuit, right? I say protect yourself, like you might get sued less. But if you're not addressing kind of the core function of the website, you're not going to have many people on your website to begin with. And so what Glen talked about, like UserWay being a secondary alternative, right? Unless you address that function, then like some of these overlays create a very different experience for somebody who enables it, right? It totally changes the experience they have of your website. And that actually falls into like segregation. Like that's illegal for a whole different set of civil rights laws, right? And, even, okay, we have a person here 24/7. You can call us. We'll tell you exactly what you want to know. That's been thrown out as well because privacy and security, those are also civil rights that they've now enacted for a lot of people. And so like getting to the point where there was that decision in the court system last year, there's a lot of other things that have come together where it's just like, you got to do this right. There's not a way to get around it anymore. It's a matter of time. And the more traffic you get, the worse the problem could be for you, right? I certainly, like, the lawsuit is there and it's real, but we can also build in a way that's positive, right? We can look at, like, what do we do as marketers? We want more good customers coming into a business and it to convert well and it to connect business, service providers with people who need the services. And so kind of starting there and just letting WCAG be another way that we can extend what we do as an offer. If it qualifies for the tax credit, even better. Using UserWay as a secondary alternative after the thing is built right, very cool. Why not? But I don't know about the language, but like you can't polish a turd. Just
right.
Putting a nice little wrapper on something that underneath is just not right.
Great point. Yeah.
It's not really it doesn't fix anything. It makes business owners some money and it might give them some peace of mind. But at the end of the day, it's not really as functional as it really could be to just extend it a little bit further and actually build the thing the right way.
And it's certainly going to give you a false sense of security if you feel like having the overlay is going to, mitigate the legal liability issue, right? So,
Would you pull up UserWay Lane? Let's just look at this from a common sense standpoint instead of someone that's just looking for a shortcut. So we talk about adding the UserWay plugin that would protect you and from being sued. Would you go up in the navigation pricing, and then let's click on pricing of an audit. So if the UserWay plugin, if you scroll down a little bit until we get to a blue bar right there. So if the UserWay plugin made everything accessible, why would UserWay be selling an audit to tell you what's wrong with your website? They're not stupid people. They're very intelligent there. So they're still telling you that you need an audit, and then from that audit, the applications need to be applied to your website to make it accessible. they're not trying to hide this. This is where most of their money comes from, are audits.
That's a great point, Glenn.
So yeah, if we're not just looking for a shortcut, we actually take a chance to look at the provider and what they're doing. They're not trying to say this is the end all be all. This is just a way to do a tool that's going to be helpful. But if you want to fix the website properly, you have to go back and recode or rebuild the website.
Let's talk about real quick conformance. You have, there's level A, level AA, level AAA. And as far as conformance, why don't you guys give our audience just a quick primer on what that means?
You have three different kind of degrees of level in compliance. AA is your accepted standard. It's been referenced in every lawsuit that I've seen. If you have federal laws that are 502, 503, 508. Those are depending on if you're a government entity, if you're a nonprofit, if you have a contract with the government. All of those laws that are very well defined and well written on a federal standpoint reference AA standard. Every state law that I've seen that's been instituted in the last 3 years references a AA standard. So that's become the commonplace of what you have to do to maintain as a minimum. AAA websites are going to make it very bland and very boring. So AA is what we have to meet from a legal standpoint and what all the lawsuits have referenced.
So when you guys design an ADA compliant website, you're designing it, you're building it to conform with level AA compliance.
Yep. WCAG 2.1. So we're the 21st iteration of the ruling from the W3C, and it applies to AA standards. That's correct.
Okay.
And this is kind of how funny these attorneys are and how creative they are. I have not seen a lawsuit that references 2.1. It all references WCAG 2.2, and 2.1 came out 2 years ago in June. So almost 22 months ago, the new rules came out, and they're still referencing 2.0 in the lawsuits.
So they're referencing 2.0 in the lawsuits, not 2.2.
Yeah,
2.0.
exactly.
Okay. Got it. All right.
Because they haven't even met that standard, much less the current standard. And most of the 2.1, to be realistic, was for mobile devices. Those were some of the biggest changes they made from 2.0 to 2.1.
So as I want to kind of wrap up our episode here and let you guys talk a little bit about, next steps and how you guys help agencies. But to recap what I hear, and then correct me if I've heard wrong or misunderstood, but there's a couple of big benefits for agencies to pay attention to this and get on it. Number one, just being more sensitive to approximately 20% of the population out there that has an accessibility need of one level or another. And so just being sensitive and showing that you care as a company, as a business, to all of your potential customers, not just a segment of them. Number two, by building or having an ADA compliant website, you're going to capitalize on more of the market share. There's some of the people that you would never get because they can't browse your website because it's not accessible. Number three, you're going to do better in SEO because by applying WCAG compliance guidelines, you're going to, as Fletcher went into a long kind of discussion about this or explanation, you're going to do better in SEO because you're just simply applying more data and more clarity, as I think was the key word, more clarity around each web page. And it's not just a whole website, it's each individual web page on your site that's getting that attention to bring clarity, not just for Googlebot, but also for the disabled user. And lastly, fourth benefit is you're going to at least mitigate or avoid some of the legal liability that potentially is out there today if you have done nothing to bring your site into compliance. Is that a fair, accurate, or assessment?
Yeah, I think you did a great job. We need to hire you to summarize what we talk about all the time, Glen. You've done well. Thank you. Yeah, and don't forget the tax credit. The tax credit's fun.
The money.
Yeah, the money, baby, the money. But yeah, I think it's close enough to what a lot of people do, where they can start to see it after a second. I'm glad I was able to recognize it kind of for what it was, and to be able to kind of bridge that. Like the Americans with Disabilities Act just plain and simply changed the way you have to build a commercial building. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about business websites. There was a mom blogger who got sued, Glen. How long ago was that? Like, this is somebody who doesn't even really have a business. They're just doing a blog from home.
I think it was March.
Didn't have an
just a month
accessible
ago.
website. Yeah, March.
March
Yeah.
last
So
year?
No, this year, 2020.
This year. Wow.
yeah, and so this really applies to 1.7 billion websites, 97% not accessible. We're looking at 1.5 billion websites that are, potentially. So it's like chances you getting sued, not great. But the thing is, the more traffic you get, the more you're in the crosshairs. And so I think because we were all doing SEO, right? We know how it works. We knew that the more traffic we were getting to a website, the larger that the crosshairs became.
Sure.
We became more of a target.
The more people are finding, and the more people potentially can't crawl or can't view your website.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I look at it from a business standpoint. Understanding that those of us that have SEO agencies that run properly, typically we charge a little bit more than someone that's going to say, I'm going to rank your site for $200, $300, $500 a month. Because a lot of us know that when you get into complicated or anywhere, a little bit of competition, it's going to cost a little bit more to do that. What I like about this is, it gives you an entry point that most business owners are going to have, because most business owners have a website. Maybe 15, 20% of them can afford to spend $1,000, $2,000, $5,000, $10,000 a month on proper optimization. Because when you look at this, there was a study done I saw, I can't remember who it was from, 2 years ago. The average small business in the US has an advertising budget of less than $4,000. So that person that has less than a $4,000 per year advertising budget is never going to be an SEO client to a proper SEO agency. But they're going to have a website. They're going to want that website to work the best as it can, and they're going to want someone to make sure that it's taken care of for them. And that's kind of where I looked at it, from a different revenue stream than optimization. And it's kind of been interesting. We've had several conversations over the last 3, 4, 5 weeks with this little COVID thing going on. And we've seen some people that are just freaking out because they've lost a good percentage of their revenue from clients that were paying optimization, that maybe they were in a specific niche, that niche isn't working out or whatnot. I've actually had some people that I've done work for over the years that are their SEO clients and they're my web design clients, because they brought the business to me to help take care of it so then they could do SEO for it, that they've asked them to pause their SEO fees for 2, 3, 4, 5 months. They don't ask to pause their website fees because they want their website to still work. So it's just a different revenue model, a more sustainable revenue model, and a lot bigger piece of the pie that you can sell something like this to add to what you're doing from an SEO model. So it's just diversification and giving you more entry points, because I worked for a phone book for a decade, and the stats were just kind of glaring there, that it took X amount to acquire a new client. But once you had that client, if you took care of them, to increase them so much each year by providing more services was easy, because they already know, like, and trust you. So you can expand once they're a client versus getting them to become a new client at a high price point.
So that's a great way for us to segue into how you guys help agencies, because I know, most successful agency owners are busy and they've got, dozens to hundreds of clients, and diving into WCAG and all these guidelines, you start to look at all the different components of it. It can be quite overwhelming. It's like drinking from a fire hose, for sure. I can see a lot of agency owners going, all right, I get it. I don't want to have the liability myself. I want to provide better service to my clients. I want the opportunity, and I want to help them realize the opportunity. But there is no way that I'm going to be able to deliver an accessible website that's compliant, and train my team on how to do all this stuff and learn all these things. And it quickly gets overwhelming. I remember looking at the first time at WCAG, and I was like, oh, right. Well, how in the world are we going to incorporate this into a new website? It might take me a couple months just to learn, and then to try and figure out how to put that into workflows and tasks and make sure that it gets done on every single website, on every single page. It quickly becomes balloons into a really big, like, how in the world are we ever going to get our arms around this and offer it? So help us understand how you guys help agencies, provide accessible, compliant websites.
I think I've been talking a lot, Fletch. It's your turn.
I get to talk about this. Yeah. So, one of the things that Glen had, and our third partner, Mike, had been building websites to the standard, and they had been contacted and wound up under contract because some of those clients had already been sued. right? So they know that they needed to get that standard. And so Glenn and Mike had a lot of these processes already in place.
Mhm.
And, you know, when I started talking to Glenn Moore and Mike, who I've known for the same amount of time, I've known him since 2013 or so. That's when we started really looking at, okay, well, you know what? There's a lot of agency owners out there, and I have a relationship with a lot of them. I've coached and trained a lot of them, and I like a lot of them. And I knew that one of the bugaboos was like getting on-site right and getting all those systems and standards in place, the processes, managing it. I'm not a manager. I don't do that stuff very well. But I also knew that by not doing that stuff very well, I'd held myself back financially. So what we do with WebA11y, which is the company that Glenn and Mike and I are all partners in, is that we essentially have a white label service that does this specifically for agency owners. So that, and we have, I say, fixed pricing. Our pricing is very simple. We call it wholesale pricing for members that we have. So if you join, become a member, you get access to white label pricing and wholesale pricing that lets you then go out and just figure out what your markup's going to be. You sell the website, they fill out the form, they pay, you keep the profit, the information goes to us, we take care of the build. Now, what Glenn also alluded to is a little different business model, right? So we're building a website to a standard. There's some upfront cost, right? It may cost a few $1,000s to get the website built properly, but then we need to maintain it at that level too, right? And so there's kind of a monthly recurring. It's more the business model that we have, and that Glenn recognized is that hosting companies, and what I'll add to that is specifically hosting companies in regulated industries, like financial industry. Like if you've ever done SEO with like a financial services company, they're not going to give you access to their site, because if you wind up putting something on there, their license actually can wind up jeopardized because they're communicating something that you're not allowed to do. So you have to send everything through like a compliance officer. Well, that's what Glenn essentially is. He can act as a compliance officer on these websites. He knows how to have the systems in place to make sure that websites stay above that 2.1 AA standard. And then, so our model then is hosting maintenance, monthly edits. If you want to continue to add content to the website, that's something now you don't have to do yourself as an agency owner. You don't have to figure out, oh, I got to go in there, I got to update the stuff, and oh, did I forget to set the meta title right? Did I put the alt text on there? Did I maybe add a picture that doesn't have enough color contrast from the background? On and on and on, right? There's a lot of things that go into, really what you need to do to manage websites. I know because I've done this, 800, 1,000 times with websites I own. I know how much goes into building websites. I say the right way. I wasn't even coming close to building them to this standard. I was just building them to an SEO standard that ranked and communicated value clearly. So with WebA11y, that's really what we wanted to do. I have a background experience with kind of membership and training sites. So the nature of the membership also gets you access to Glenn's sales training, right? Glenn has been in sales now for over 20 years. We've got some really, when we pulled up the WebAIM tool, went to a website, you pulled up that error. Like, it's really easy to go through and do prospecting this way, right? If you want to go after attorneys in Long Beach, California, just go to Google and look for attorneys in Long Beach, California, and just start going through their website. And there's an easy prospecting method. If you want to go to page 3 because they don't have SEO in place either, you can now sell that. And so the training that we've got in place is really designed to help agency owners understand how to sell this more. Because teaching somebody, it took me long enough to learn SEO and to develop the understanding I have. And there's certainly nothing wrong with it. I continue to do it. I love doing it. It's something that will continue to be a driver in what I do professionally. But having them learn the technology behind hitting this WCAG and WordPress and plugins that update and break something else just wasn't my cup of tea, right? I'd rather be kind of in the relationship business and helping people understand the nature of what's going on, making sure that I took care of them as a client, and then let somebody who really knows how to do what they're doing, which Glenn and Mike do, manage the build out of these websites. And then the benefit I get as an agency owner, say I'm a customer of a member of WebA11y and I've sold clients, is I've now got, like Glenn talked about, an ability to talk to people that may only have $200 or $300 a month that they can spend on their digital marketing, right? That's very different. Like if you're making 10 calls and you can sell one of them, this may create a situation where you make 10 calls and you can sell 4 of them, right? There's just more people that are in this price range. And so that recurring revenue from people they might dump SEO, they might dump pay-per-click if times get tight. They're not going to dump their whole website. And this website comes in a way that keeps you, somewhat protected from lawsuits and gets you a $5,000 tax credit. And so that's not really something they can go out there and like even try to shop around, or like if they pull that, they lose a lot, right? And we're not trying to hold anybody hostage. The website's yours. You can take it and go if you want to. But just the nature of the situation, there's not other places that really do this right now. And so that's kind of the way that we have this offer kind of framed up and the situation that we're in right now.
So agencies that are, go ahead, Glenn.
The maintenance portion of this is sometimes somewhat of a mind change from a lot of business owners and some marketers, but it's imperative. In 2019, the number one reason that lawsuits were dismissed where it was an overzealous attorney or plaintiff suing someone that was actually accessible. So what we do is when we make the site accessible, we go through, document, and doing the different audits to show what's going on with it. Then what we do is we go through once every 90 days, do another internal audit to every site that we manage, and again, document that this plugin updated, so we had to change this was out of compliance, now it's fixed. So that way, should a business owner be sued, we can give that documentation to the marketer to share with their attorney to say, well, this is what's going with our website. It's met these compliance standards. What's really wrong with it? Now, we're not saying it's not going to cost them any money because, again, in the U.S., I have the right to sue you as a God-given U.S. citizen anytime I want to. It may mean that instead of it costing them $10,000, maybe so they don't have to pay for their attorney for 4 or 6 hours, the plaintiff attorney says, okay, give me $1,000, we'll go away. It may still cost them some money, but we can mitigate those expenses quite a bit. And it's just the best model that I was able to see when I was doing this research for ongoing to protect clients, because I saw too many of the old model where I'm selling you an audit. After I give you the audit and tell you all these things are on your website, Lane, I'm going to talk to you for an hour afterwards and answer any questions you have, which if you're not familiar with this, you're not going to know what you don't know. You're not going to answer those questions. And inevitably, you can be sued 6 months, 9 months, a year down the road, and you're kind of sitting there holding your own bag because, again, it's a different model that you're not used to. So it was the only way I could see that I could sleep at night by helping clients get there and then helping them to maintain it.
So real quick, the model that you guys have for agencies is you're their white label partner in the background that are helping them develop ADA compliant websites for their clients, where they can just kind of hand it off to you. You guys do the work and they deliver, to their customer a compliant website, along with the ongoing hosting and maintenance and upkeep of that website to be in compliance on a quarterly basis. And then the other thing it sounds like you have is, as part of the $200 per month, is giving the agency access to the team, to the solutions, and then also this sounds like some sales training, how to actually sell ADA compliant websites as a new solution to either existing customers or new prospects. Is that right?
Or just teaching how to sell. I mean, there are a lot of people that don't have a lot of sales experience, that don't understand how to script out and organize a sales meeting, how to make it work, how to do what's best for the client so you can leave with a win-win. Yeah, I've been doing that part for years, just helping them get out of their own way, for lack of a better analogy. This is how to have a presentation with a client. This is how to make things, how to do a Fletcher, what I call it, how to ask a lot of questions, how to go through and know more about their business so that you're not selling them, you're providing a solution based on what they need. And a lot of people just haven't had that core sales training.
Sure.
Yeah, and Glen's background is not only in sales, but he's a sales trainer as well. And so the nature of that is really designed to help you as an agency owner get your own sales processes integrated with this new kind of offer that you can have, right? And so setting up those standard operating procedures, the SOPs in your own agency can quite literally be based directly on what we show you that Glen walks through, right? And I own an agency as well. Like I'm going through the process of starting to do the outreach and integrating this with what I do. And so in an ongoing way, we continue to provide more information and more training on what we're actually doing on the ground in the field, so to speak, to integrate this into our own agencies.
Well, and what we have and what I came up with over the last couple of years was a way to help either A, if you were sued, because Fletch can sue you today. You can start negotiating with Fletch on the settlement for you. It doesn't mean that I can't sue you next week, next month, next year until your website's accessible. So we've come up with some layouts, or what we call themes, to where if you're sued, we can have your website up and running within hours or days to protect you from being sued again. Or realistically, from a lot of these small business owners that are having a website that was built by a Wix, a Squarespace, a phone book, a newspaper, they're better than those types of websites, and they're at a price point that, again, your business with not a lot of overhead can afford to pay for. I mean, I don't know anyone else in the country will build some accessible templated websites for you for less than a couple $1,000s. So we're selling those for, again, a lot less expensive, so that they can make money. They can sell those as well as custom sites. And we've actually put together on a spreadsheet to kind of share with people that if you can just sell one of each of those a month. So if you could sell 2 websites a month, one cheap one a little bit more expensive, with between the your upfront cost money you make plus your part of the residual each month, you make an extra 42 grand this year. Now, if you can be a little bit more aggressive and you can sell one of each a week, you'll make 170 grand just off of what we're doing all the work in the background. So it's definitely not a bad revenue stream and we call them partners or whatever, because literally we're partnering with. They're dealing with the clients, we're dealing with the work, and we make a few bucks along the way.
And obviously helping agencies really capitalize on a massive opportunity. I mean, when you say 97% of all websites are inaccessible and not compliant, I mean, that's just a massive opportunity waiting for at least a few agencies to start picking off that low-hanging fruit, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what we see. Yeah.
What is this A11y? I've seen this. I meant to ask you guys. So I've seen it. I did a little, before our podcast today, I did a little research, and I found that this is actually a term that's used a little bit more, frequently in the website accessibility world. What does it stand for, or where does it come from?
It's called a numerous. It means there are 11 letters between A and Y in accessibility. So it's just a way to take a long word and give it a small acronym. So it's just another thing that people in the industry call for accessibility. It's just A11Y because there's 11 letters between A and Y accessibility. If you're out talking to developers that kind of maybe think a little bit more of what I call tunnel vision, I've had fun telling them, because there's 11 primary components of accessibility. And I said this is where it came from to a group over in Las Vegas last fall. And they came up afterwards and they go like, that's not what A11Y means, right? And I said, yeah, but I said, if I can explain it like this, how many people are going to leave the meeting knowing it? They're all going to remember there's 11 primary components of accessibility. Now they're like, oh, okay.
There's your sales training coming into play, right?
Exactly.
That's awesome. Well, guys, we went over a little bit, but this is a huge topic, that we could probably spend another hour or two talking about. I'm sure you guys have done plenty of that, but for those who will listen and or watch this episode, at least we got a great primer today on ADA compliant websites, why it's relevant to agency owners who are in the marketing industry. As it comes to being a marketing center of excellence, we want to, help promote best practices, in the industry. And clearly, ADA compliant websites is a best practice, and designing and developing websites is a best practice according to the ADA guidelines. So, I appreciate both of you, your insight, your experience that you've shared. Really love what the solution you guys have for agencies, because again, I can see this being such a big, topic and corpus of information to try and understand and just implement, that agencies are just going to need a solution, like a white label solution like you guys, to help them out with it, because it's too big in the grand scheme of things, I think, for most agencies to in-house all of this themselves, at least over the next year or two. I mean, maybe over time you can get better and better at it, but the opportunity is clearly there. Anything you guys want to leave our, as kind of closing remarks, or anything you want to let our audience know as we close up today?
I appreciate you having us on, Lane. It's been a pleasure to get to listen to you a couple weeks ago at a digital conference that was online. And I love questions, as Glen talked about. I love questions, and the questions that you've brought have helped me also see the way we do things and bring about some of the more important aspects and elements of kind of the offer and the situation. And so I just want to say thank you. and from that's like sincere, the more people kind of are aware of this and know about this, the better off everybody is. It's kind of like building the web the right way, right? We all win that way. And so kind of getting the word out, so to speak. I'm just thankful that you asked us to come on.
Well, you guys are clearly at the forefront of this, and as a whole industry, I can tell you. I mean, I know you guys know this too. We are way behind in this aspect as an industry of ADA compliant websites. The statistics and the data clearly show that. And so, for an industry that's already behind, and you guys being on the forefront of this, I just appreciate you guys, leading the way in this and helping the industry and the agency owners in the industry at least be more informed, better informed, get some education on it, and have a solution that they can rely on if, in fact, they see the importance of this but don't have the capability internally to handle it all. So thanks again for your time today. Glenn, anything you want to say as we wrap it up?
No, again, I'd just like to reiterate what Fletch said. Thanks a lot for having us on. Thanks for taking the time out of your days to promote and provide this type of information to people across the internet. I think what I've been trying to do is what Fletch is doing, and what you're trying to do is just trying to inform people so that at least when they hear about this, it's not where I hear a lot of times from clients coming in the form of a lawsuit. So, the more we can inform and educate people, that way, if they make a bad decision, it's their decision. At least they're aware of it, and they can make an actual decision from it.
Guys, awesome time. Thank you so much for just taking your time to educate me, educate those who will listen and or watch as we get this put out there. But thanks again for your time. I super appreciate you guys and respect what you're doing, and can't stress enough for those who will listen and or watch this episode. If you guys have any needs or any questions, feel free to reach out to Glen, Fletcher, or Mike at WebA11y.net. That's how you can get a hold of Josh, Glen, and Mike. Guys, thanks a lot for your time. I appreciate it. And until next time, we appreciate all those who will listen to this episode of the Marketing Center of Excellence podcast. Thanks, everyone.